And we welcome you to another season of Dark Side of the Ring. And the reviews here on This Is Wrestling. It's Lee Versage in beautiful Ashton, Ontario. And in bootylicious Belleville, it's our good friend Zach McGibbon. Zach, it's another season of Dark Side of the Ring, starting with a three-parter. I'm actually really pumped to talk about the series, this first three-part show, but I really love Dark Side of the Ring as a wrestling fan because it's one of the few things that I don't feel like I'm having the wool pulled over my eyes a little bit. We get some truths in Dark Side of the Ring, whether we like it or not. So I'm very excited to be able to review this season with you again here on This Is Wrestling.
Yeah, I'm in the same ballpark as you when it comes to Dark Side of the Ring. I think in terms of looking at something through a neutral lens and not having it be overseen by a major promotion that produces their own videos or documentaries like this, to have like an outlet like Dark Side of the Ring to be able to put together these stories and get a whole bunch of people to be involved with the project. I have really enjoyed a lot of the seasons of Dark Side of the Ring. It's amazing that we're in the 7th season now of Dark Side of the Ring. I remember when this show was first launched and thinking, oh, hopefully it'll be good. Hopefully it'll be something. And then look at where it's been at today. So many topics it's been able to delve into. And one of these topics of TNA where it's kind of funny to think of how long TNA has been in existence now. And there's some stuff we'll talk about where now that time has sort of passed, and in a lot of cases, something I lived through as a wrestling fan.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of an interesting way to kind of look back on it. It's not been a lot of times the last little bit where I've gotten the chance to really look back on TNA and in this case, Jeff Jarrett's story arc around TNA. So really looking forward to this review.
Well, and I say this with all due respect, and you know that I mean this. You don't get a chance to actually review a lot of things in the past that you lived through from kind of beginning to end as a wrestling fan, as opposed to let's go back to the Attitude Era, or let's go back to, the NWO or DX or whatever it is. And yes, you're a historian and you talk about it like you were there, which I think is incredible that you're able to do that. But this is a little different, right? Like Jeff Jarrett and the battle for TNA and the Jeff Jarrett story in TNA is something that you actually watched and lived through, kind of like when I talk about ECW, and I love ECW, but I got to live it every week. And I didn't just go back and review it. So I'm really looking forward to a lot of what you have to say during, these episodes. And just as a whole, they did this in 3 parts. Jeff Jarrett, TNA, and I'm like, really? 3 parts? And I have to say, Zach, we'll start at the beginning, but I have to say, after watching the 3 parts, I'm like, they could have gone 6. There's a lot that they just kind of skipped over, and I'm not blaming them, but when I first went into this, I'm like, well, they got a lot to fill here in 3 separate shows. And by the end of it, I'm like, wow, they skipped over a lot.
Yeah, especially in that 3rd episode, which we'll get to. But that 3rd episode, we went all the way from 2011 TNA to present day in 20 minutes. I was like, whoa.
I know. They literally skipped 4 years in 2 seconds. They went, and 4 years later, Hogan's gone. Like, what?
It's like, wait a minute. Whoa.
There's a lot involved in there.
It's like time out, pause. But yeah, there's a lot in there that they were able to get in. And I think I was coming into this initially like, okay, this is kind of looking back on TNA. But as this show progressed, as these episodes progressed, I realized what they were kind of going more for. And I know that it was kind of in the title, but I think a lot of people were going into this like, okay, how are they viewing TNA at this stage in 2026? How, years have passed, what is TNA? But the way that they presented this series of episodes was more of how Jeff Jarrett and TNA kind of coexist with each other and how the story of TNA kind of is intertwined with Jeff Jarrett, all the highs and the lows. And there are a lot of lows when it comes to TNA. And
Mhm.
so some of the ways that it kind of intertwined. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to break down. And it's really, they kind of set the tone in episode 1.
So episode 1, of course, starts off like most of these episodes do, with a little bit of a history lesson and, a decent job, I thought, in sort of explaining the relationship from Jerry Jarrett to Jeff Jarrett, and, the up and coming star that's been in the business his whole life because his father. And they very quickly, in my mind, like when I was watching episode 1, I thought, man, they are going quick here. But they had to, because the story of Jeff Jarrett and his history in the WWF, and some of the things with Owen Hart, that those are really interesting to a lot of people, but that's not the story that they were telling. So they did, I thought, a pretty good job at wrapping up a bunch of history in the first 15 or 20 minutes of this show, Zach.
Yeah, I agree. They did a good job of explaining the connection to the wrestling industry that Jeff Jarrett has. And it was kind of tying into the Owen Hart stuff later, but just showing his upbringing, being in a wrestling family with Jerry Jarrett and idolizing his dad, but having family turmoil even at the start. I did not know that he was estranged from his mother at one point. I guess still is at this
Mhm.
point. I was not aware of that when they revealed it. I know obviously that I knew about the Jerry Jarrett stuff, and there's more to it obviously later, but I didn't realize it was also his mother. And you just see a lot of the mannerisms and characteristics of Jeff Jarrett. You kind of see through his upbringing as a kid and trying to get into the wrestling business and starting out as a referee as well, and then really getting more connected with his dad.
The 9.99 pay-per-views starting off with TNA. I What are your thoughts on those, like, shows and the way that it started, and coming up with, of course, they came up with the company, and there's Vince Russo entering into the show for the first time, and he enters with a bang
Does he
because
ever?
he came up with the name, Zach. And what was the name? TNA. What was the reason behind it?
Bro, it was tits and ass. Bro, I came up with the name TNA. And it's like, okay. And he was very in your face about it too.
Yeah.
Like he was not, you're shockingly, Vince Russo was not subtle about it. So he was very in your face about it. So it was
Taking a
very
lot
loud.
of credit for something that I'm not sure that you should be taking a lot of credit for.
Yeah, it was kind of funny the way that they edited this, the montage, because it's like, we're looking for something different, like a name that's different from everything else. This screams wrestling. This screams this. This screams that. And Russo's like, I'm just gonna tell it to you straight, bro. This is this is what I came up with, bro. And I was like, oh god, it was very funny how they edited this together.
Just a very quick thought on the 9.99 pay-per-views, because while it seemed cheap, I always thought it was very expensive, like as a fan.
Hmm.
Or like, I'm gonna pay $10 for one show, and it's pretty much like paying for the pay-per-view that the WWE or WCW was doing anyway at 40-50 bucks a month.
Yeah, I mean, when you really add it up, if you wanted to watch a month's worth of TNA shows, it would just add up to a regular pay per view at the end of the day, for one pay per view for the WWE. So it was weird how they presented this in the documentary. This is kind of one of the things I wanted to
Mhm.
mention. It was weird how they put this across, because they were like, oh, like they want to do something different from the WWF, and so they decided to do the weekly pay per view is like $10. And I was like, that's not, if they had it their way, they would not be going to pay-per-view trying to sell an individual show for $10. It was because they did like what any sort of upstart wrestling company would do, and that was go to the television networks and say, hey, I've got this product here. I'd like to put it on your airwaves. Can you pay me a fee so I could put it on your airwaves? And all the companies said no, because your name is TNA. And you're very new. Wrestling was very different at that time because obviously WCW and ECW go out of business. And so it's just one company. And it's this idea that maybe wrestling isn't as healthy because of it.
Mhm.
And they needed to establish themselves a lot more if they were going to get to TV. So they come up with this idea to do these weekly pay-per-views. And they did it off of the idea. There was this guy that was advising them. His name was Jay Houseman. They didn't mention it in this episode, but there's a guy named Jay Houseman who's like, oh, if you do this, like you'll average 50 to 60,000 pay-per-view buys a week. And you'll be able to get all your money back from the pay-per-view buys each week. And they were kind of mapping it out. And so they started doing it. And within Weekly, it turned out this Jay Houseman guy was maybe embellishing a little bit because they kept thinking, oh, we're getting 50 to 60,000 pay-per-view buys for these weekly shows that we're doing. So they're thinking, oh, not ideal, but we're making money off of this. And it turns out when they were getting the receipts from the pay-per-view carriers, they're like, no, you're actually not getting 50 to 60,000 pay-per-view buys a week. In fact, you're probably getting more along the 10,000 to 20,000 at best, which is still a lot for a weekly pay-per-view, I think, but nowhere close to what they were estimating. And within weeks, like not months, weeks, that company was already in financial turmoil.
Yeah.
Just from that week. And so I found it odd that they were trying to get this idea across, like, oh, this was like a new revolutionary concept of like the $10 a week pay-per-view and something different than the WWE. But it's like, well, that's also because they were desperate and they couldn't get a TV deal. And so they're like, well, we got to try this, see if it's going to work. And they did it off of bad numbers from a liar, like a noted liar, and that embellished to them. And within weeks, they were trying to get funding, and they did mention some of the companies that they were trying to reach out to for funding when it came to TNA.
Yeah, so they ended up getting some funding from Health South.
Yep.
And that kind of, gave them a little bit of freedom to go and say, okay, we got our funding now. For me, one of the biggest things, we mentioned Vince Russo already, but they really, in the episode, made you think as a viewer, and this is possibly the truth, but they made you think, okay, Jerry Jarrett, old school wrestler, as Vince Russo said in part one, like he wants you to think it's the USWA in 1970s, bro. That's just not going to work anymore. But Jeff Jarrett brought in Vince Russo to sort of, I guess, in his mind, try to balance this out between the I need something new and fresh instead of my dad's old school ideas. But he brought in Vince Russo, and we already watched what Vince Russo had done in the late 90s and early 2000s in WCW. And I there's so much, but they brought Vince Russo in, and all of a sudden they started showing all the things between, the midget and the garbage can and what he was doing, and just all kinds of crazy things. And Vince Russo was talking like WCW taught him nothing. That was stunning to me. Like, just thinking that people evolve over time, and where Vince Russo came from the WWF and the writing, and then into WCW, where he turned it into an absolute crap show. He learned nothing, Zach. And Jeff Jarrett suddenly was caught in the middle of his old school dad and Vince Russo going off the deep end the other way. And it made for the viewer, for me to feel, I know where Jeff Jarrett wants to go, but why didn't Jeff Jarrett just do this himself? Or like, why did he have to go, if his dad was 0, why did he have to go to past 100 when he could have just got somebody at 50? You know what I mean? Like, Vince Russo was so much past 100, and his dad you know, like it or not, at Zero old school ways, you could have just gone out and got someone to go in the middle instead of trying to blend those two together to meet in the middle. You know what I mean?
One would think, but as you will learn with the story of TNA, there wasn't a lot of smart decision making when it comes to what the things that they wanted to do behind the scenes. It was funny that Vince Russo clip was like, "This ain't 1970s USWA, bro," which he's correct because USWA technically didn't exist in the 1970s. It was 1989. Typical Russo not knowing that, but it was weird. They were trying to show this counterbalance, being like, oh, like, because one of the things that they were also trying to put together is that TNA was this revolutionary product in a way because of the X division and this, and they go into it a little bit deeper in other episodes, but they were trying to establish like, oh, I want to get something that made it stand out from the WWE. And so wanting to combine, as you mentioned, the Vince Russo, the Crash TV style, shock jock style booking that Vince Russo brought with the classic principled pro wrestling that Jerry Jarrett brought, who also, put his own money into this project as well. And you had these two chaotic figures coming together because Vince Russo is his own enigma, but I don't think people realize how much of an enigma of his own Jerry Jarrett is because of his longtime success in Memphis and just the way that he would do business. And you saw a little bit of it in this documentary as well. But it's one of those deals where I don't know why Jeff thought this was a recipe for success with their constantly butting heads, especially when it's a family member. It's different when you're in business with a family member. And I know when it comes to pro wrestling and especially family members in pro wrestling, they just think so differently than what I will say a regular, normal human being would think when it comes to, meshing family with business together. But it was weird just Jeff thinking this was such a good idea, having this big clash and trying to find it and streamline it through. It's like, oh, we're going to find this nice middle part.
I guess the whole 3 episodes kind of made Jeff Jarrett the good guy in the end. Like, you felt emotion, and I think you felt sorry for Jeff Jarrett. Maybe people didn't. I don't know. But I think that was the idea, that he is the sympathetic figure in all of this, just trying to do right by the wrestling business. And I suppose that's true. But Zach, you're going to have to remind me that Jeff Jarrett was there in WCW. Oh, right. He laid down for Hogan in the middle of one of the biggest wrestling things that ever happened. At Bash of the Beach 2000. He watched Vince Russo do this to a major, major, major company. Not one that barely has funding. Why he thought that this is a good idea and why they skipped over the relationship of why, like, that's one of the questions I absolutely would have asked Jeff Jarrett. Of like, why did you think Vince Russo was the answer after watching what he did to a much bigger company and one that you were directly involved in?
Well, and quite frankly, if you were to put some truth serum into Jeff Jarrett, because one of the things that they also did a good job of is that he's a very nice guy. I've interviewed Jeff Jarrett twice in my wrestling podcasting career, I guess you could call it. Once for this show and once for my previous radio show. And I'll bring that up as a different example because I think it was an interesting dichotomy the 2 times I've interviewed him. But if you were to put some truth serum into him, I think he would say, well, Vince Russo was also somebody that gave me my best push ever when he was the head booker. Like, they mentioned it in the show. They're like, Jeff, he's a very good wrestler, good hand, but not somebody you would put into a main event. You saw that in the Attitude Era. Like, not somebody you could put up there with Steve Austin or The Rock or whatnot, but somebody you definitely want to have on your roster. And lo and behold, he's in WCW. He's getting the best push of his career. And it just so happens the head booker at that time is Vince Russo. And so when you're getting the best push of your career and you're getting pretty close with the booker, I think there's also a loyalty factor that comes with that. And Jeff thinking, well, you could also, to steal a wrestling phrase, work yourself into a shoot. It's like, well, we saw what happened with WCW. but they always cling to but those 2 years that he was writing into WWF for the Attitude Era, how he got into WCW in the first place. They always cling to that. It's like, oh, we can get those peaks back if we just, change some stuff around and get Jerry in there. He knows the wrestling, and they mix it all together. I don't want to speak for Jeff, but I think that's maybe the idea and the thinking is like, oh, if we're able to have that oversight guy that can strain out the bad ideas. But you look at the TV that NWA TNA was putting together. You mentioned with the little people and whatever, and the girls in the cages and whatnot. It was very raunchy, like very 2000s, very 2000s when you watch it.
So I think the bigger story in episode 1 as it went along, right, is the insertion here of they lost their funding from Health South. They needed to find new funding, and they found it in Panda Energy. And the Carters, who own Panda Energy, and their daughter, Dixie Carter, who was looking for something to kind of dig her teeth into, and her family was looking for something for her to dig her teeth into. And that to me was the overriding story of episode number 1, Zach, is that's where Jeff Jarrett first lost control of the company. And it was almost like, hey, we got our funding, and I know they own, 51% or more than we do, but it's still our company. Yeah, let's go forward. This is awesome. And that was the big story of episode number 1 for me. Like, in comes Dixie Carter, and like, were people naive to the fact that, oh, she's just gonna like be quiet and write the checks, and as the majority owner, and everything's gonna be fine. Don't worry. Leave the wrestling to the wrestlers.
Yep.
And obviously, as it goes along here, we'll figure out that did not happen. But right away, my alarm bells are going off as they're telling this story. And I know the history of it, but as they're telling it, you're like, how could you not have seen what's coming? Right?
Yep.
Like that is the big thing in number 1. And they take you through a little bit of Jeff's life. And unfortunately, with his first wife and the battles that she had with cancer, and, what it did to the kids, and like Owen Hart dying and everything else. But the story about TNA and starting it up and being Jeff Jarrett's idea, and he's the head guy, and they gave up majority control of the company fairly early in all this.
Yeah, it's talk about bad decision making earlier. First of all, I mean, sometimes it's tough, right? But that Health South guy overstating his profits, it ended up, that whole case didn't end up getting him into jail. It was a separate case that got him into jail. But the Health South stuff is like, again, a company on the brink, and they are still a very young company, still very new. So many times in TNA's history where you're like, this company's going to die. Like they need this. And somehow, some way, they find a way to break through. And that was also kind of the tone that they were starting to set. The different obstacles that this company has had to go through and find a way to overcome. And the introduction of Dixie Carter, it's kind of one of those, like, what are the odds chances? Because Dixie was technically, she was a head of a PR firm that TNA was working with. And obviously the funding gets pulled. And Dixie, like they're going around asking people, and Jeff's talked about going to with this different business partners saying, hey, if you want to pull out of this, like, I understand, because money's tight and all that. And it just so happens that the head of the PR person, the PR firm that they're working with, just so happens to be the daughter of a big corporate and energy company that has billions of dollars in backing. And they start to very much invest in this. And like what you mentioned, it starts to set, sow some seeds here of potential tensions, because they're like, oh, Jarrett, like, yes, they were majority funding this, but I still had decisions over the wrestling side of things. And with this funding, we were going to turn this around, and we were going to finally get the push that they were going for. And near the end of the episode, they talked about getting onto Spike and how that was huge for that company. especially because Spike used to have the WWE. Seemed like they were going to be out, but TNA was able to get in on that slot. So they established Dixie Carter coming in and saying this brand new partnership that's going to lead to a lot of years of prosperity. And they talk about making a profit, during that time. So it was interesting how they kind of set the stage. And for you and I, Lee, that have seen TNA after that, how much things would change and differ coming out of that.
Well, and as we go into episode 2, for the first half of the show, that's pretty much it. It's Dixie Carter coming in, and they get Kurt Angle, which was a massive part of taking the next step, and things are starting to roll. But what do? They end up bringing in all the old guys.
Yep.
All the guys that were super popular 10 years ago. But guess what, Zach? They're older. They're not as good. They never were great to begin with, but they caught fire for a little bit. And 10 years later, the part in the show where they talked about the morale of the people who were there, the AJ Styles and the Samoa Joes and the Christopher Daniels, you're like, no crap. Those guys weren't too happy with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and like you name it coming in and taking a paycheck and see you later. Right? And that was basically the first half of the show until they started to get into the Karen Angle part of it, which to me was the first part that this really kind of picked up and got to another level to tell the story. But the first half of part 2 was, Dixie's good and she's signing the checks. And there's a little bit of she's taking over some things that Jeff Jarrett doesn't like. And Jeff Jarrett is shocked. That one caught me totally by surprise. And it's like, she owns the company.
Yeah. I don't know why you're so shocked.
Like we don't need you on a video game call. I was in shock. Actually, she just owns the company.
Yep. She's the president and of the company that you went into business with Panda Energy, that is the majority investor into this. And you, on the record, were saying willingly that you gave up that control because you knew how business was done. Is now all of a sudden so shocked that that investor that has the majority financing on this company would make decisions such as putting in Dixie Carter as president of TNA, and be shocked that she would, make decisions on behalf of the company on her own without you involved. Like it goes back to, like, again, Jeff, and this is kind of an early overall thought, like Jeff comes across well in this, in the sense that when you watch, he's a very likable guy.
Yep.
He's very likable, and he's very, like, I don't want to say calculated, but he's very good with his words and understanding what he wants to say. But he's also got this thing where anytime Dixie Carter is mentioned, he's always like, no, I wouldn't have done that. Or it's like, Dixie made that decision. He always throws in these little slights, if you notice.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Jeff, come on, man. Like, I know you're trying to be the charming guy. I get what you're doing here, Jeff, but like, come on, man. It's a great point of how they just kind of set it all up in that first half of the decisions. And one of the big things that they were really setting up in this episode of, like, how naive she was to pro wrestling.
Right.
There's the scene that I think it was D'Lo Brown that was explaining, like, seeing Kevin Nash talking with Dixie Carter at the bar. I could just totally see this too, like
eating her drinks, pouring her wine, and like, oh, Dixie.
Yeah. Kevin Nash having wine, I totally could see that, absolutely. But like going to Dixie is like, you ready to take over the wrestling business? And just saying all the words that Dixie wanted to hear when it came to owning the company. It's like, I could totally see Nash doing this. It was, boy, the edits about Nash too did not make him look great. It's like all these old talents that were good 10 years ago, as you mentioned. It cuts to Kevin Nash like working a match. No, it's like,
Kevin Nash was never great.
No.
Kevin Nash just caught fire at the right time and was friends with the right people.
Yep.
And good for him. I don't take away from a guy that really didn't have a ton of talent to make as big of an impact as he did. Good
Yep.
for him. But not good for you if you're falling for it 10 years later when he was super bad.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's
Right?
older, as you mentioned. And we've said it on this show. I think we're the people. I think there's people that really like Kevin Nash, in terms of like personally or whatever, like interactions. But man, every time I see him in these things, I find like people like the nonchalant attitude in some is like, but
Right.
for
It's
me,
almost
it's not nonchalant.
it's almost because they want it in their own life. That
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
literally convinced of that. It's like I
That's a
want to be
great point.
I want to be cool. I want to live like that guy lives.
Yeah. Make a lot of money, don't have to work too hard.
Yeah.
And there's this idea he's this like cool guy. But for me, I always found it to be a carefree attitude. It's like, come on, man, like give a little bit of a damn, like I every time I hear him talk, I just feel like it's in a way where I feel like he's talking down to you in his nonchalant.
Oh, 100%. But where I have the fault, like I don't like Kevin Nash. I've never liked Kevin Nash. And I haven't fallen for any of this crap that he spews all the time.
Yep.
But I actually put the fault on the people. Like Kevin Nash was the head booker for a while in WCW. Like,
Yep.
are you out of your minds? Like the people who put him in positions of power, those are the people that I really have a problem with. Because you can be like that all you want, but how he convinced people to like let him do things.
Right.
Anyway, this isn't about Kevin Nash.
No.
It is about, like I said, the next part of the show, they end up going to, the Jeff Jarrett, Karen Angle part of it, and, the beginning of their relationship. I guess what I want to ask you, there's a couple of very noticeable people that did not speak on this show. And we'll get to the biggest one here soon. Would you have liked to have seen Kurt Angle on the show?
Yes, I would have. I think there were some things that he could have certainly helped because he is such a big part of TNA. There are a couple of people I want to see. I think the two biggest ones, Kurt Angle, and I think the other one would be Dixie Carter, which we'll talk about.
Which we will. The fact that she was not on camera for any of this. And that's a huge storyline in itself of these 3 episodes.
Yeah. And other ones I would have liked to have seen, and I'll get back to the Kurt Angle one in a bit, but other ones I would have liked to have seen. I would have really liked to see Mike Tenay interviewed for this because he was such a instrumental part as the voice of that product as well.
Yeah.
I really would have liked to see Tenay. Obviously, you can't get Don West, which is still tragic, but somebody that was representative there would have really liked to have seen him. But in the case of Kurt Angle, he is such a big star. And the thing with the Kurt Angle story, they didn't really tell the full story of how, like, they made it seem like, oh, he's available. You just jump on the channel. I'm like, WWE didn't just release him because they're like, he's no good anymore. Like, think about it this way. WWE in 2006, before the drug policy was instituted, said, think about that, said, we can't have you in your premises because your drug problem is so bad. We think you're going to die under our watch. We have to let you go because you're refusing to go to rehab. The WWE said this. Like,
I'm not laughing, but
right.
The fact that people got away with as much as they did in that company, the WWE, and they're the ones that said, yeah, no, we can't do this.
Yeah.
Like, he was a huge star.
Yes, absolutely.
Until just let him go. The WWE, who had all kinds of drug problems in their company.
Yep.
It's a really good point that you make because they made him seem like he was a free agent. Like his contract was coming up and man, we just got him.
You got to swoop in when it's like, no, he got him because he was on death's door, WWE. And WWE said, we can't have this in our company.
Right.
And so they made no mention of that. I was like, oh, you got to mention that if you're going to like talk about big swings, like, cause that's a big part of Angle's legacy in TNA, unfortunately, is cause you took a risk on a guy that, yes, he could still work. And he probably had his best years in TNA in terms of peak in-ring ability as a performer as Kurt Angle. But you also have to talk about how this guy had such a massive drug problem, massive drug issue.
Yeah.
is like having all these issues
So
is just like it wasn't brought up. And they kind of alluded to it with Karen, but other than that, like again, he just wasn't just available and they swooped in under WWE's noses. It was like he was available because WWE didn't want him to die on their watch.
I really would have liked to have heard from him just going to TNA, what that was like for him. And all of a sudden, with a guy with a massive drug problem, what sounds like at least a failing marriage, but
Mhm.
you always want to hear from all the parties to know, like, you never just take one side of the story to go, hey, this is what happened in our marriage. Like, it's never going to be the full truth.
Yep.
So I really would have liked to have heard from him. And in that department, and then coming in and, because I think also to me, Karen Jarrett, Karen Angle, same person, ended up as a little bit of a sympathetic figure in this too. And as I step back from all of it, you go, man, she was with somebody who had a massive drug problem in Kurt Angle, massive. And then in the end, she was with someone who had a massive alcohol problem in Jeff Jarrett. Right. And
Mhm.
two very, very difficult things, I'm sure, for her to navigate. But it's also, you just know there's other sides of the story.
Yep.
And I thought they made her look, quite sympathetic and like being there. And they kind of end the episode with, she nuked his whole bleeping life. Karen Jarrett talking about Dixie Carter.
Yep.
Okay. You guys, like, I know you own some of it, but you work for this person. Not all, if you can believe this, Zach, not all boss employee relationships end up great.
No, no, not at all. Not at all. And the thing is too, like the reason why the Karen stuff is because Jeff's first wife passes away from breast cancer. They talk about it in the episode, and it's actually like a really well done. Like you really get a sense of how much people liked, his first wife, and
Yep.
just there was the rare thing I never have seen Scott Steiner be emotional like that. Like he
Yes.
got up from his chair and it was very like, whoa, like that's when it really kind of hit for me.
And Scott Steiner didn't offer a lot in this.
Yeah. No.
Like, just being in it and commenting on it, he didn't offer a lot except for that part.
Yeah. As soon as that happens, like, whoa, like that kind of it's one of those things that's where it really hit me. And so that's when the relationship between Jeff and Karen starts to develop. And the reason why it's such a big deal is because the owner of the company it's perceived by the wrestlers in the back that the owner of the company, one of the major financial backers of the company, is in a relationship with the top star's wife. And there's not been anything clear to them about, oh, they've broken up or this is a divorce that's happening or whatnot. And it's all tying into the relationship between Jeff Jarrett and Dixie Carter because it's one of the things they didn't mention in this. And it's a question I wanted to be asked and it wasn't asked. The big thing that came out of that was in that arrow was the story goes that Dixie had asked Jeff about the relationship between he and Karen and said, is there a relationship going on here? And the story goes that Jeff told her no, there was no relationship going on, even though they were having a relationship. And then mentioning the Christmas party during the Dark Side of the Ring episode, and then Dixie's stunned to see them together. And then that's when things turns like, oh, then that's when she tried to do the power play and
So,
all this
okay,
stuff.
so let's just go to that moment because that was very odd to me.
Mhm.
So, first of all, incredibly, I sympathized a little bit with Dixie Carter because you just laid it out. Like, the owner of the company in Dixie Carter has a partner, and yes, they have less. We've established that Jarrett did not have
Mhm.
equal,
But still a business partner.
but still a business partnership. and was one of the faces of the company, and they bring in a new top star, and Jeff Jarrett is with his wife. If she didn't know, they made it seem like it was no big deal. They made it seem like, everyone knew except for Dixie Carter. And then they invited Dixie Carter to their home. I was confused because how could Dixie Carter have not known, and then they invited Dixie Carter over? Was this a master plan of, look, everyone else does know and Dixie doesn't, so we're gonna invite Dixie over, and everyone else is gonna be there too, and she's just gonna end up saying, "Oh, isn't that cute?" Just like everybody else. They made it seem like they played it perfectly, and Dixie Carter was the one that had all the problems with it. But if I'm the boss, and I actually don't know that, and whether she did or whether she didn't, they made it seem like she did, and we haven't heard from Dixie Carter. If she didn't know, and she found out at that Christmas party, she had a right to be mad.
Yeah, I agree. I came away from this and the reason why I bring up the first time, because it wasn't mentioned in the dark side thing, is because Lee, we're in together here on OSN. We're partnering up.
We are.
If I tell you, you come to me and you ask, "Hey, are you working on this project here? Like you're working on this new show? You're going to a different network or something like that, and you're working on this show?" I go, "No, Lee, no, of course not. I'm not going to a different network and going on to this different show." But then later on, you come to my Christmas party. This is to a lesser extent, but I think you get where I'm going here.
Yeah.
I invite you to my Christmas party.
Everyone else knows you're with this other company except me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I bring people with that other company to that party. I say, "Oh, by the way, Lee, this is my new co-host on the other show that we're doing." You'd be pretty mad. You'd be like, "Wait a minute, you told me this was not something that was happening, and now you surprised me at this party, and I wasn't aware." Like, I would, if I'm Dixie Carter, I'd be mad too. I'm like, because like this is my business partner, and he's lying to me and telling me, "No, this isn't the case." But then I'm getting, bamboozled or whatever. I'm not aware of this. It just goes back, and so that's why I was kind of like, "You're really shocked that all of a sudden she doesn't trust you and all this stuff."
Well,
that's why I wanted that question answered, because I'm like, did that happen? And again, goes back to Dixie Carter wasn't interviewed for this. I would have really liked to have had her explanation, or somebody that represents the Dixie Carter side, to really try to explain this, because as you mentioned, they made it seem like it was this grand scheme or whatever, and Dixie just was so appalled, and like, "This is when I start my vindication." Like, I know, like you lied to your business partner, who, by the way, has the majority investment into your company. Why would she feel she could trust you at that point?
Right.
So that's what really kind of bothered me.
I agree. It bothered me too. And I'm not coming away thinking that Dixie Carter, we didn't hear from her. They certainly, as we kind of transition here into the third and final episode, they didn't make her look very good. And maybe there's lots of reasons why she didn't look very good because of her actions. But at least I understood if there was a bit of a divide, and Dixie Carter, because they always made it seem like Dixie was about ego, and Dixie wanted to make the power play, and Dixie was all about herself all the time. But even for somebody that owned the majority of the company and wasn't about themselves, they still had every reason to be mad and not trust Jeff and Karen Jarrett at that point.
Yep. It was also interesting at that point. I didn't, because we talked about Russo earlier being like a big ally of Jarrett, but over time, Russo ended up being a major ally for Dixie Carter. Like everything, like this is Dixie Carter could get her opinions on stuff through Vince Russo, because here's the thing about Russo. He knows how to survive. Like he knows how to survive in that environment.
He watches trends, and he always sides with the people who are going to come out on top.
Yep. He knows how to survive in that. And that's why, and it goes into episode 3, he eventually becomes the lead booker on stuff. And it's funny. They did throw in the Fire Russo chants. Could you imagine, WWE or AEW right now where the crowd would chant "Fire Paul" or "Fire Tony" or whatnot? I don't think people truly comprehend that the product was so bad that the fans knew who the booker was in 2000 2005 or
We're
2007,
chanting it on TV.
and we're chanting on TV that you could hear, and they were chanting "Fire Russo."
Yeah.
And but still, Dixie was so loyal to Russo. It was like he knows what he's doing. Like going back to that naivety that she had as an owner and trusting the wrong people, trusting workers.
Yeah.
So and that kind of transitions to episode 3 where our old friend Hulk Hogan makes a return.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, old Hulkster's on the way with his, right hand guy, your guy, Eric Bischoff.
Yeah. Oh,
And
I'm gonna talk about Bischoff this episode. My God.
because, yeah, I can tell you that nothing surprised me from the Hogan Eric Bischoff, and that's not a good thing, but nothing surprised me. So they come in, and basically Dixie is now like sending Jeff Jarrett home and taking over. The meeting.
Oh, yes.
Zach, so Dixie Carter has a meeting with the talent, tells the talent that cameras are going to be there, sits them all up in a crowd, and videos this meeting with the intent and follows through on putting it on television. You're either with me or you're against me. If you're with me 100%. And it's the first time I really sympathize with Jeff Jarrett sitting at home, looking at the workers' faces and going, yeah, this ain't the company that we thought. Just your thoughts on Dixie Carter having a meeting with the talent and basically saying, like, it's me. I'm in charge. It's my way or the highway. You're either with me or you're against me. And videoing it and putting it on television. I just can't even imagine. Like, this to me was one of the worst decisions that somebody has made in a long time in this business. Videotaping a meeting about the morale and where we're going here in the future and putting it on television just to make it, at least in her mind, trying to make it like showing everybody
Who's the
on and
boss?
off TV, I'm the boss.
Yeah. I saw it. I remember watching it a couple years after it happened and being like, wow, this is insanely stupid to do this. I hadn't seen that in years.
Yeah.
And so I seeing it again, and just like, not only Cammersley, the lighting, they lit this up to make it look good for TV.
Yeah.
And they did camera cuts showing the talents' faces, and the talents are just like looking at this. What are we doing?
Yeah.
I still see AJ Styles' face. I still see so many
Yeah.
talents'
I see
face.
Christopher Daniels' face.
Oh, and you're just looking at this as like, it should have been known at that point that this was going to be downhill from here for TNA. And I will say, I have to push back on Jeff a little bit, be like, 2002 to 2009, those were like the peak years of TNA and blah, blah, blah. Man, Jeff, TNA's creative was bad during that time too, especially 2009. Like, it wasn't like it was so great and then Dixie took over, the creative plummeted. That's the big thing with TNA throughout its run, is that it's had such bad creative to go with some of these younger talents that they had on the roster. Like, the wastes of years that Samoa Joe and AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels had in that company because of the astronomically bad booking that happened. They had a young Okada in there. What did they do? They dressed him up as the Green Hornet sidekick and called him Okado or whatever.
Yeah.
That was their big idea for one of the biggest stars in Japan. So Jarrett coming in, it's like, we had it so good. We had it so good in TNA during. It's like, Jeff, I know you take pride in launching this company and giving it a place to work for talent. Man, like, this was not 1990s All Japan.
Okay. So I hear your point, and I absolutely agree with you. But what happened after this was Hogan and Bischoff coming in. Of course, Hogan comes in with full creative control over his character.
Yep. Bischoff is the representative for him in those meetings.
Because Hogan can't be in the same room with Vince Russo.
Because of the lawsuit that they had against each other.
Like, and Dixie Carter thinking that this is a good idea, or somebody thinking that this is a good idea and telling her, and Hogan comes in, and Zach, I'll just sort of let you go on Hogan and Bischoff and taking away this excited ring and basically doing whatever they wanted to. And it was like old times in WCW just 10, 12 years later.
I was going to say, which part of WCW? 2000? Because it certainly was the good old times in some cases.
Yeah.
It's like that, or 99. Yeah, I mean, this is when I started watching TNA. So I was in the middle. I came in during the middle of the Hogan run. But I remember all that stuff of just being like, first of all, that very first episode where they debuted inside that six-sided ring or whatever. And they're like, we're changing things up around here, brother. Things need to be different. And Bischoff ripping up the format sheet. The fun story in that was a legitimate format sheet that he ripped up, and it was like one of only 2 copies or whatever. And so they were scrambling to try and find, because they're like, oh, wait a minute, what's supposed to be coming up next? Because that was a legit format.
Incredible.
That's TNA, man. Like, that's TNA. Like, that was a legit format sheet that he ripped up. And they're like, oh, we got to change things for us. And so I will say this. I'm not a six-sided ring guy, but I understand why people like the six-sided ring, because it made it look different from the competition. And there was a part of the identity. For me, I could do without the six-sided ring. I was more than okay with the 4 sides. But when you have a rabid fan base like TNA's hardcore fans are, and just getting rid of it and saying, like, and scolding the fans for saying that they wanted,
right, you're spitting in the face of the people who brought you to that point. And if you were going to say that the future needed them to go away from a six-sided ring, and here's why, but here's all the capable people in charge, okay, but that obviously was not the case. And with the fans chanting to bring the ring back, and Hogan and Bischoff just looking at them like, we got you guys, we got you by the balls, like we got you, and we know we have you, and you can't do anything about it. It was that smug, like, and the poor fans. Yep. And I like the six-sided ring, but I can hear like very valid arguments about it not being there. But I think when you thought of TNA, that it was the identity. It wasn't just a part of it. I thought it was most of it. And yes, they had great talent, but when you took that away and it just looked like another wrestling promotion with Hogan doing whatever he wants, it took away all of what TNA had built up.
Yep. You mean to tell me bringing in the Nasty Boys in 2011 wasn't going to give it a little bit of rocket fuel?
Like coming in, you're like, oh my God.
Yes.
Oh my God.
They show that press conference too, and Dixie being like, we just needed that little bit of rocket fuel to take this company to the next level. And Hogan saying, you know, we're taking this company to the next level, brother, and gonna do this with me. And again, going to the 4 sides. And
so one of the other things they did, like right in that time, was go head to head with the WWE,
which was such like
on Monday night. Like, are you out of your mind?
Yeah. Totally not understanding why WCW was able to compete with WWE in the first place. And they actually laid it out very well in the documentary, where there was like, with WCW, it was also well done production, big stars on the stage, looks like it's made for TV, main TV, and competing against the WWF, where at that time their production wasn't at its best.
Right.
Still solid. But now you look at WWE during that time, and it's funny to think how much bigger they've gotten since then, but they're this global company, big bright lights, big fancy television set, like, oh, this looks big league. And then you go, sorry to the fans of the Impact Zone, but you look to the Impact Zone and the way that it's laid out there, just from looking at it alone, you just feel like you're watching an inferior product, and they're going head to head directly.
Yeah, it was never that though. And I think pretending it was just because Hogan got there.
Yep.
Was the whole downfall in the first place. And that's why I talk about the six-sided ring. Like, in retrospect, if you had somebody leading the company that was really good, okay, I can hear the argument. But it, like, everything they did was just the same as WCW in in the 90s because it worked. And this was not the same fan base. It was not the same production. It was not the same money. It was not the same, a lot of things.
Yeah. I got a kick out of Bischoff saying, I don't remember what the ratings were during that time. Come on, Eric.
That bleep. Like, I'm telling you, I like Eric Bischoff more than you. But for him saying, well, I don't quite remember when he wants to remember ratings,
yeah,
he certainly does.
And there's something that he remember. He had a whole show called 83 Week, like a whole show dedicated to his ratings run. But also, too, we'll talk about it later, but there was something that he definitely remembered and he wanted to take credit for. But again, Bischoff was just something I wanted to mention earlier with the 6 sides where he's like, I didn't get the 6-sided ring. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess Bischoff and I share one thing. But the way he explained it, he was like, what does a 6-sided ring do? Like, what are you doing with a 6-sided ring? I'm like, did you watch the product? Clearly not. Like, I know you were, with Jason Hervey with your production company doing your 10th reality series, whatever, about like Pawn Stars Detroit or something like that. But you gotta like know why they were so mad at it was to the point where I actually was kind of wanted the 6 sides back the way that he explained it. It's like, well, hold on. So Bischoff just continues to annoy me. I don't understand why people think of him as this genius, quite frankly. But like, yeah, again, he's like, I don't remember the ratings at that point, when they went head to head to the WWE. I know they were great. Yeah, they weren't great because after like 3 months, you got kicked off to a new time slot. 3 months. 3 months, and they moved you to a new time slot in TNA. I still remember the announcement from today coming in and be like, fans, we heard you loud and clear. TNA is going back to Thursday nights. I was like, yeah, right. They should have never left Thursday nights to begin with because they couldn't buy into the idea of being the alternative. They had to be the competitive number 1 or number 2. It just still boggles my mind. But there was one other thing that
I know,
Bischoff
but
was willing to take credit
all of that boggles my mind from just a business point of view. Like, look, again, you mentioned OSN earlier. This is wrestling going to be a part of OSN. I can tell you, I got a lot of ideas for OSN and where it's going to go. I know you do, and some of the other people that are going to work with us do. But I can promise you that not one of those ideas is trying to be exactly like somebody else.
God, no. Why would we want to do that?
I can tell you it's actually the opposite. It's like I'm going to have to at some point be held back by you and other people to not do everything that other places are doing, to not do exactly the opposite of everything that they're doing.
Right.
Like at some point you're going to have to leave, you might have to come around to like just a couple of things that they do well. But
right.
Because there's so many things that just, it's not, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not in the, like if OSN is going to succeed or This Is Wrestling or like in this case, TNA wrestling, it's got to succeed. And the people in charge have to have the betterment of the people that are working for you as their first interest. How can we make these people successful? Not how I can become bigger and more famous and like, how can we all just be successful and be proud of something? And they had that in their hand in TNA. They could have done that. I mean, you look at what AEW is doing right now. There's a lot of comparisons. In fact, as we are recording this right now on Dark Side of the Ring, there was an announcement today that the WWE planned a show on the same day in the same city.
Yep.
As AEW. But for the most part, AEW is just doing their own thing. They're not trying to be something that they're not. They make mistakes, and just like we're going to make mistakes or other companies, but you have to have just the idea of what is going to make us successful and not compare yourself to somebody else. Yep. And them trying to go on Monday nights head to head against Monday Night Raw is one of the more asinine things I've ever heard of. To think of that somebody in a room was like, yes, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Have you watched your show, bro?
Bro. You know who of all people made a great point about that? Vince Russo. He played it excellently, where he's he's like, you're not doing this for the betterment of TNA, bro. You're doing it for the betterment of Hulk Hogan, bro. And that was the ultimate. And I'm sitting there, I'm like,
You're agreeing.
yeah, I'm like, he's the worst person I know. Made a great point. Like, I can't disagree with that.
The person
Like,
who makes more about himself than almost anybody else.
yeah,
But unfortunately, Hogan and Bischoff are probably ahead of him in that chain, and that's who he's talking about. So he looks great.
yep. And it's still just thinking about Bischoff and Russo in the same room in TNA trying to pitch ideas, and Bischoff's only there to make sure that the Hulk Hogan character is protected because Dixie is so like clinging on to this idea of being like, oh, we're gonna be this big company and we're gonna be just like, you know, we're gonna really take this and be number one, like this just naive. Just so frustrating watching it back and just knowing that era and some of the roster that they had was
Exactly.
just, oh,
And that's what I'm saying. Like the roster was so good. Where could they have gone and just been a viable product for fans to go and watch? Would probably have meant success for your company and people making money and being looked at really well and other people wanting to come and work for you because you've built something respectable. Like, isn't that success? I guess it's what success is in people's minds, right? One of the best people on the show by far for me, and he didn't go in like great detail sometimes, was D'Lo Brown.
yes.
And when he said we were the fly on the ass of a rhino, I'm like, yeah,
Yep.
yes, perfect.
I love me some D'Lo Brown.
Yeah, but
and I loved him there.
The company, and he knew. He's smart enough. Oh my god. So one of the big things, like I think back to that era where you came in, and I had a very big disdain for Hulk Hogan. So anything that Hogan was involved with actually turned me off, as opposed to he's going to bring in so many people, the brand of Hulk Hogan. Like for me, it was the opposite. But one of the things that really did interest me, and I don't know whether it's the half blurred storyline, or maybe like we like to think, or I like to think that some of it is real. But the one thing I think back to in that era of TNA and Impact was Kurt Angle and Jeff Jarrett with Karen Angle there.
Yep.
And those two putting their differences aside. And, you know, as Karen Jarrett rightly pointed out in the show, you know, if it was really real, do you think that Kurt Angle ever would have gone along with it? We were co-parenting kids, and we have been for 15 years or 20 years or whatever they said. But you knew as a fan, there's obviously I don't care whether you get along for the sake of your kids or not. I don't care if you're happy with your other partner or not. There's a little bit of like, the guy stole my wife, or even if that's not true. Like maybe you just lost your wife or your husband and now you're with someone new. And with Karen Jarrett saying like, of course it wasn't real. Well, no, the reason it worked is because everybody knew that happened. And what is one of the more famous love triangles that played out on TV, Zach?
Talking about Matt Hardy, Edge, and Lita.
Like, did Matt Hardy and Edge and Lita rise above it to try and make $1 in good television? Sure. Was it real? You bet it was real. Right?
Yep.
Like, they might have got past it, but it happened. And then they were fighting on television. So for me, I went back to that interests me. as a fan because I know some of that is real because they didn't just make up that Karen Jarrett was Karen Angle and went with Jeff Jarrett. They didn't make it up.
Mhm.
That actually happened. And then for me, Jeff Jarrett was a decent to good wrestler and Kurt Angle was a great wrestler. But the matches they had, for me, define that time, that era. That's what I remember. The blurred storyline, but when they actually got down to the wrestling, it was really good during that time because you believed it a little bit because you thought it was somewhat real, but the two were just really good at what they did.
Yes. I remember a lot of that Kurt and Jeff storyline because, again, I came into it after the whole stuff with the divorce and whatnot, but I was aware of some of the things that was going on. And you can watch it and you're like, wow, this is kind of heated. Like the way, if there were, I'm still kind of new, so I didn't know if they were working me or whatnot. But
Yep.
I'm like, wow, this feels really heated. Like they really don't like each other. It's amazing that they're working with each other on this. And funny enough for me, the one angle I will always remember from that is actually when Jeff Jarrett's in that karate class or that jujitsu class because he's trying to
Oh, yeah.
counter Kurt, and so he's putting all the kids in the ankle lock.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm gonna be Kurt Angle, and I remember just dying laughing at it. Just like, oh, this is kind of a good hokey for me. But that whole storyline, yeah, I was like, wow, they're really trying to blur the lines here with this storyline. That was kind of like, it reminded me because the way I got in was Punk blurring the lines, be like, oh, is this real or whatnot? And some of that element as well was in the Jarrett and Angle storyline and other parts of TNA for me. Like I was a big Bobby Roode guy at first when I came in. Austin Aries was kind of on the come up in 2012 as well. I remember those series of matches, but I remember that feud, that storyline between Jeff and Kurt was kind of the thing that was like, oh, I'm kind of interested in seeing carrying this through as I started to get more into TNA.
I love me some beer money.
Yep. Beer money.
I
Love me some James Storm.
Love me some beer money.
Yep.
A little bit away from Jeff Jarrett. They tied him in a little bit. And I was wondering why they were telling this story in the middle of it because it didn't really have a lot to do with Jarrett. But in the end, it ended up having to do a lot, at least, when you look back on it. And that was the story of Victory Road in 2011, Sting and Jeff Hardy. They did a good job because they had Matt and Jeff Hardy talk about it.
Yep.
How big of an event, like when you look back on TNA's time, how much did that negatively affect the company?
A lot. A lot.
And what I'm talking about, folks, is that if you haven't seen it yet or you don't know, Jeff Hardy was wrestling Sting in the main event of Victory Road 2011 for the World Heavyweight Championship and came to the ring intoxicated, like very intoxicated, whether it was alcohol or pills. He was nowhere near where he should have been. And I didn't like Bischoff's kind of like, I guess, it's possible. Like we let him, and D'Lo's like, biggest mistake we ever made.
Yeah.
He's like, we could have made 1,000 decisions and there's only one wrong decision and we made the wrong decision.
Yep.
And honestly, that was Eric Bischoff's call.
Yep.
And he went out and fixed it or tried to fix it.
Yep.
So I give him credit on that part of it. But again, this Sting ended up pinning Jeff Jarrett in 30 seconds or Jeff Hardy. And that was it. So again, you think it hurt the company a lot.
Yes. Especially perception wise. It was, so when I was coming in, watching it, the perception was LOL TNA. And it still lingers in my head for the longest time. And when the Jeff Hardy incident happened with him showing up under the influence and them still sending him out there and then having to fix it all again and do the big shoot pin from Sting. And I don't remember if they showed it in the episode, but Sting looked into the crowd afterwards and somebody sounds, that was, BS or That was a bunch of crap. And Sting going, I agree. I agree.
Yeah. So they didn't show it in this episode, but it's been played over many times.
Yeah. Of Sting going, I agree. I agree. This is not a good look. Perception wise, it made the company look low rent. Disgraceful that the fact that they had sent that guy out there. They had already been battling a perception issue, really, that was magnified, I would argue, from like 2009-ish onwards in terms of good creative and also just decisions behind the scene and all the things that have happened to TNA. But this was really at that time just kind of put the cherry on top of it. Is like, this is an unserious company that cannot be competitive or serious about its aspirations, the wrestling industry.
Yeah. I didn't like the fact that Jeff Jarrett sitting at home at that time and then was called to the arena and said he came, realized he couldn't do anything and left, saying that it happened on Dixie Carter's watch and she's ultimately responsible.
Yep. That's what I was kind of alluding to earlier. Try to keep getting the digs in on Dixie.
Because as the episode went along and you found out a little bit more and then what happened to Jeff Jarrett later, would he really say like, yeah, it wasn't my fault. It was the people who threw the shows on. It was their responsibility to keep me off the shows. To me, it's Eric Bischoff's fault because Eric Bischoff had the final call and looked him in the eye.
Yep.
And said, I think he might be able to walk it off. And made the call to send him through the curtain.
Yep.
Like that's, I don't know how much more of a final decision there can be when Eric Bischoff was the guy who was like, no, I think he can walk it off. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, this is the same Eric Bischoff that in that same episode said, when talking about Jeff Jarrett's issues, was like, well, we knew that Jeff had some issues, but we felt like he was in control of it. And I was like, Eric, God's sake, man. Like very frustrating.
I didn't like how they very quickly after that, I think was it right around there?
Well, after that, they then showed the moment that Hogan left the company.
Yeah, and just like, oh, and then just, Hogan leaves like a couple of years later.
Yeah.
What?
They didn't show all the stuff in between with him getting back in the ring or his daughter getting married to Bully Ray and that wedding and rise of Aces and Eights.
Which Aces and Eights I actually thought was a decent storyline.
Mm-hmm.
And the Brooke Hogan, Hulk Hogan.
It was very, very influenced by that motorcycle show. I forget what it's called, but all of a sudden, but it was very influenced by that motorcycle show that was popular at that time.
Yeah.
And Bischoff's big motorcycle guy.
Hog Wild.
Hog Wild. Yep. It's so there were elements of Aces and Eights that, so I remember not liking Aces and Eights. I remember thinking this was just kind of a joke, but as time has gone on, I see some of the ideas with Aces and Eights, what they were doing. The problem is when I associate Aces and Eights, I think of Tito Ortiz coming out as the August Warning or whatever.
Yeah.
And like him like posing and Mr. Anderson's trying to like sell it, but the crowd is like dead quiet. And Anderson's like, oh my God, I can't believe that is whoa, what are we gonna do? And the crowd's just totally dead silent.
Yeah, I remember Aces and Eights like for a long time, and Bully Ray and Brooke Hogan were, getting married, and Hulk Hogan didn't want them to get married, and like just for the longest time, and then pulling kind of the wool over everyone's eyes. I thought the problem with Aces and Eights was that they had too many members too quickly.
Yes.
Like all of a sudden it was Bischoff's son was in it.
Garrett was in there.
And like whether
Mike Knox.
Yeah, exactly. Whether it was, Mr. Anderson and then Bully Ray and Devon and Taz.
Yeah.
And like Taz didn't wrestle. So like, oh, we're gonna switch him over so he can be on commentary. Like,
right.
Anyway, there was just too many, but I did think the ideas were pretty good, and him winning the world title and, having Brooke Hogan as a wife that he still wanted to be married to, because he knew that it helped him and she hated him. I thought it was decent, but, like most things, right? Like kind of like the NWO was decent for a while, and then it became not watchable.
Too many members and went on too long, and
Yeah, all that stuff. But
sorry, who was in charge of TNA during that time of Aces and Eights? Where a major group, it went on too long. There were too many members. Who was in charge of that?
a motorcycle group.
Well, yeah, the motorcycle group. But it's like, oh, Eric Bischoff,
Yeah,
Hogan, Vince Russo.
yeah.
Interesting.
But I thought so. All of a sudden, they skipped ahead. They missed all of that.
Yep.
And they went to and Hogan left, and then they very quickly went over.
But before the Hogan leaving and Dixie holding on to Hogan's
the leg. Oh, that was.
And Bischoff's mind was clear on whose idea it was for that. Like, pretty sure it was my idea. Yeah, I'm sure it was Bischoff.
I love how he comes across like he almost can't remember, but
yeah, I'm pretty sure it was my idea. And yeah, I'm sure. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was your idea there, Eric.
They all talked about how Dixie Carter fell for it.
That was the one for me. I remember watching that, like, and just like feeling so embarrassed for Dixie Carter and the company, and just like as they mentioned, the fact that she would say yes to just knowing that Hogan wasn't coming back. It'd be one thing if it was for an angle.
I'm on TV and I'm with Hulk Hogan and I'm going to be famous.
Yep. And I remember there were rumors at that time she was trying to get a reality show going, where it's like they were going to do like a backstage look of like Dixie Carter being, the president of a wrestling company in a male dominated field or whatever, which is admirable. But the problem is like the way that Dixie Carter went about the business and just being naive to everybody, all the top stars, knowing how to work Dixie, and then that final moment of like dragging, like hugging onto his leg, and Hogan's walking off and be like, "Oh, get off me, brother. Like I'm out. I quit." And it was really a big part of that downfall of TNA during that time.
Again, quickly, I wanted to mention they skipped over very quickly Jeff Hardy beating Jeff Jarrett in a loser leaves TNA match.
Yep.
And I'm like, and Jarrett loses a loser leaves TNA. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Like, oh, okay. Like, I remember that match, but I was like, oh, all right.
I didn't remember it. I'm just like, that's how he left again? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, and then they go to Toby Keith, and Toby Keith's going to be there to save Jeff Jarrett, and Global Force Wrestling and him coming back. But the one quote I remember, and I can't. What was the guy's name? The Sahadi. The
yeah, David Sahadi. Yeah,
David Sahadi, the director, saying that Jeff Jarrett was on a revenge tour. And I'm like, so now all the things that we've criticized everybody else for everything that they were doing, and now Jeff Jarrett's doing it.
Yeah.
I felt a little bit bad for him because obviously at this point they get into his alcohol abuse and traveling to Mexico and Triple Mania, and him, like the video of him, what he's doing before he's going to go out there is just insane.
I have never seen that backstage video before.
Right.
I remember the Triple Mania stuff where he's throwing the tortillas.
I've never seen backstage. Where like, that's insane that they let
that blew my mind when I saw. I didn't realize that was in Vampiro's documentary or whatever. So I haven't had time to really sit back and watch Vampiro's documentary, so I missed my purview, unfortunately. But I that footage blew me away. I saw it. I was like, whoa! Like we had all heard about the alcohol issues with Jarrett at that point, and then Global Force Wrestling. That around that time, that was when I first interviewed Jarrett. Right. And I'll bring it back later because I want to kind of do a dichotomy thing. But I remember that time very, very well when he started Global Force Wrestling. He had the arena in Vegas where somehow 8,000 people or whatnot, at least they claimed 8,000 people were in that arena in Vegas. Like, how did Jarrett pay for that? Like how did he get 8,000 people in for a Global Force taping? And that was a whole debacle in of itself, because as Sahadi mentioned, like there's new owners of the company. That whole saga, by the way, of the ownership of TNA from the transition from Dixie to Anthem, but Billy Corgan was in there, not mentioned either.
Right.
which was interesting. That's a whole thing in of itself, which Corrigan put money into it, but thinking he was going to own the company, but Dixie didn't want it because she still wanted control. But then they were able to work out a deal with Anthem where she was able to still stay on, but in a lesser role, and Anthem would oversee it. It was a whole thing at that time.
When I said at the beginning of this show that they could have done 6 or 7, these are some of the things I'm talking about.
Yeah. And that's just one part of it too. So it was a wild time, and then trying to merge the brands as they were talking about, because I think people forget just how toxic the TNA brand at that point was. Because they get off of Spike TV, again, a whole situation of itself that Vince Russo centered around, because Dixie Carter and her somehow still loyal to Russo no matter what mentality. Spike didn't want Russo in the creative team at all, didn't want him associated with Spike at all, or TNA. But Dixie's so loyal to him that she secretly hires him back into the company and tells people, don't mention that Russo is back with us at a time when TNA is trying to renegotiate a deal with Spike for more money. And the reason why the whole thing blew up, Lee, is because when Russo's sending commentary notes to Mike Tenay and Taz about what's going on, instead of writing Mike Tenay in the email address, he writes Mike Johnson from PW Insider, and he gets all these commentary notes. And Johnson's like, well, Russo's back with the company. I guess I'm going to report this. And Spike's mad because, like, you brought him back. We don't want him back. And then it totally, like, I remember that time. It's like, oh, just totally mind blowing. And shockingly, not the only situation where an email went to the wrong person at the company. Dixie herself trashing a Spike executive or a Destination America executive, which is a whole thing again of itself. You mentioned it, 6-7 episodes, but I'll mention it here. Whereas she's trashing an executive. I think it was either Spike or Destination America. Like, oh, he doesn't know how to do his job, but accidentally sends that email to that executive.
Right.
Like, oh, TNA, man. It Incredible. Is just, it's its own thing.
So, again, at the end, I think when you tell the story that somebody has gone down very dark paths, whether it's alcoholism or drug addiction or whatever it is, and they've come out of it on the other side, there is a sympathy there, right? Mm-hmm. Or, sticking with it, and like the moral of the story is you can always get through it and that kind of stuff. I thought they did a pretty good job and were fairly honest about the drinking problem that Jeff had, because when you admit that you went to rehab for 4 to 6 hours a day and then get on a plane and have double rum and cokes and like come back and you're just, drinking all the time, and you're going 4 to 6 hours because you want to be the star of the class to prove to people that you are getting better, even though you know deep down that you're not, like, that's a serious problem.
Yep.
And they told that story. And I think I learned from it, though, that there's a lot of times, I think, if you go through Jeff Jarrett's life, that you're like, oh, well, I would understand why he turned to something. Not that you should, but like, right. He's had a lot of bad stuff happen.
Yep.
And whether he did during that time and we don't know about it or not, the time where it really got bad was well after a lot of those things happened. And I thought at the end, that's what really made him a sympathetic figure in all of this. Because he got clean, he came back, they showed a little bit of the reconciliation and the things he said with the WWE, called him to go into the Hall of Fame in 2018. And then, making sure like his kids and Karen and everybody else, got part of him coming back. And now you see him in AEW, and there's Tony Khan basically saying nothing all the time.
Yeah, it's like,
Jeff Jarrett looks so great. Like he can still go today. I'm like,
Yep.
yeah, no, Tony, he can't still go today. I'm sure he looks great. And if he's helping you behind the scenes, that's awesome. I don't want to see
Yep.
him in the ring. But Tony just cracks me up every time he's on
I love
TV.
him. Yeah, he just smiles. It's just like, oh no, we love Jeff Jarrett in this company. He does some great things for us behind the scenes, and just a great guy to be around. I get a kick out of the Tony stuff because he's just so chipper and happy about it.
But he
It's
says
just,
nothing. He does
well,
the
say nothing. Yes.
I'm gonna just be happy. And oh, like
Yeah.
that's great. I think he does a great job. And
Yeah.
I think he puts up with Lee, and that's great. Like he does a great job.
He's very polite about stuff. He's like, you know what? That's a great question. I can't really answer that right now, but we love having him around this company and blah blah blah. Like that's every Tony. He's got a little bit better recently, but that's generally a Tony Khan answer nowadays, and just all happy and chipper.
Yeah.
But I think the big thing, like again, throughout it, we talked a lot of the TNA stuff, but they really did this overarching storyline, no pun intended, when it comes to wrestling. When it comes to Jeff Jarrett, of this guy raised in a wrestling family, and they mentioned the Owen Hart stuff because he's like really good friends with Owen Hart, and then he dies, Owen Hart, because of that tragic accident. And he mentions in that episode how he had to wrestle while there was still a dent in the ring. He's literally the next match after that, and he mentions there's like a dent in the ring as he's taking bumps, which again just got me all angry again about all the Owen Hart stuff all over again. But the big thing that they kept talking about was like, oh, suppress it, got to move forward, can't look back on it, can't actually address this, got to keep this suppressed. And he's doing that. His wife dies from breast cancer after it reemerges, and he's like, all right, well, it was very sad, and goes to the funeral, and because of the relationship between he and Jerry Jarrett totally dissipates. There's the scene of Jerry on the WWE.com website for before we knew it was going to be Vladimir Kozlov, saying, oh, like this new wrestler is coming to WWE, and here's Jerry Jarrett, part owner of TNA, just showing up on the competition and saying, oh, here I am. And Jeff saying, oh, I knew this was a play by Jerry to try and find a way out because he was having enough of the influence from Panda Energy and all that. And so when Jeff's wife dies, even though Jerry's not that far away from where they live and where the funeral is happening,
Not there.
And neither was his mom, didn't show up for it either. Like, and then going back to the mentality of, gotta keep this suppressed because gotta move forward. I've got this business to run. I've got to be a family man for my kids and whatnot, but not actually addressing the situation head on.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the overall theme it kind of kept going back to. And so it really kind of bubbles up into the alcoholism. And you mentioned it there where he's like faking it at first, like, oh, I'm getting treatment, but I don't actually really care about all this because I'm going to go back to what I'm doing. And I thought they did a good job. The strength of Dark Side of the Ring has always been the human interest side of things when it comes to the human beings behind the wrestlers themselves.
100%.
Because I will say this right now, ahead of the final review, there were things that I wasn't as big of a fan of when they were looking at the actual history of TNA. But when they do the human interest stuff and you're trying to get to know the person, that's when this show is at its best. And so showing him overcoming alcoholism and getting sober and then being able to move on and get into this company. It was very rushed at the end, I will say, because they were trying to fit so much in.
Agreed. And that's where it really made me think about like more than 3 episodes, because I can't believe how much they rushed things at the end.
And it was kind of something, personally for me, where it really kind of put things in perspective, because I interviewed Jeff Jarrett. So the running joke on the show, Jake Roberts was my very first interview in radio. Jeff Jarrett was my second. So Jeff Jarrett was the interview after Jake Roberts. And I was trying to get this wrestling radio show off the ground, and he had just started getting Global Force Wrestling going.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I realized at the time just how bad his issues were, because you can hear in that interview, and I remember dealing with him at that time, and he was very testy with me. Now, at the time, I just put it off to, he's at the airport, he's trying to get on a plane, and they booked him to do media, as he's trying to go to the airport and blah, blah, blah. But you could really, like, even hear in the interview, I would ask some questions. He was just not open to answering them. Like, he's very, like, set in stone about stuff. And I in my defense, in my case as well, still a bit inexperienced as an interviewer for radio.
Mhm.
And so, combination of that all coming together, you could just hear it in the audio. I still have it, and I'll hear it every once in a while. It's like, man, I wish I could go back and do this again because I just did not get him in the right comfort zone.
Yep.
And the question, like I remember asking a question about Vince Russo at that time, and he just totally like shut me down, shut me off, didn't really want to open after
But
that.
sometimes we know that wrestlers or people even in sports, right, when they are busy or they simply don't want to do the interview,
Yep.
they're not going to give you anything no matter what you do.
Yep. And I understood that too. But the reason why I bring it up is so like I remember that second interview and be like, man, I really dropped the ball on this. Like, was it me? Was it something else? Like,
Right.
was it Jeff? And having not a lot of times, sometimes you don't get that second opportunity. In this
Mhm.
case, when we started This Is Wrestling, we had that second opportunity. Remember getting the email saying, hey, Jeff Jarrett's available for an interview. Do you want
Yeah.
to do the interview? And this was a couple of years ago now. I think this was just after the pandemic. I think it was 2022.
Yep.
Hard to believe. It was a couple of years ago now.
I know.
And I interviewed Jeff Jarrett, and it was totally the opposite. It was actually kind of insane how much of the opposite was one of the better interview experiences I've ever had with a wrestling guest. He was very like a lot of the stuff you see on Dark Side really translated to the when I was interacting with them, and he was very open, like really like chatting, and was open to all the questions, and really like you could tell just from looking at him because it was over a webcam when we were chatting that he was just in a much more positive, much better headspace in his life. And it's was just kind of interested to see that dichotomy of this, that like the first time I interviewed him when he was in that sort of dark place. And obviously there were other elements to that, but seeing the second one and seeing how much he's been able to turn around and be much more optimistic is what I could take away. I remember even at the end of the interview, he said that, man, I really enjoyed that. Like I got asked questions I wasn't expecting, but like I really liked it. And like, give me your email and whatnot. What's your Twitter or whatever? Like, I want to follow you and whatnot. It was very, like, he was a much more upbeat guy. And I think the Dark Side kind of showed that progression of like, you know, all these things, how he's able to address it and now being able to go on that other end, that other side of Jeff Jarrett and being able to get back in the wrestling business with a fresh mindset, getting back to what he was as a human being. It just like, it really kind of struck me when I was watching it and thinking back to some of those chats with Jeff Jarrett, now seeing it, you know, on the screen in this documentary form.
While some things seem rushed on the show, you understand it's still a television show, bro. And
There was one of those.
they
There were a
have
couple little
to.
subplots in there that were funny. Like when
Yeah.
they asked Jim Cornette, it's like, did you make terroristic threats to Vince Russo?
Yeah.
Jim's like, well, it depends on what you define as terroristic. And I was like, oh my God.
Yep.
It's like, bro, you're doing this for wrestling, bro. This is a television show. As soon as he said that, I'm sure you and I, our ears perked up. It's like,
Oh
this
my
is a
God, did I
television
ever?
show. And he's like, bro, all over freaking wrestling, bro. It's just, I
Says
don't
the guy-
necessarily disagree with Vince. It's
Yeah, but says the
extreme.
guy who's been in wrestling
I know.
for like Vince Russo's life will be defined by wrestling.
I know, which is just hilarious. And he's like, recently he'd been putting out tweets. He's like, bro, don't watch Dark Side of the Ring, bro. They don't tell the full story. I tell the full story in my upcoming book. And I'm like, oh, this guy, unbelievable. He's still at it. It's unbelievable. But that was a great moment with Jim Cornette. Again, is Russo correct? Yes, that is quite crazy. And Cornette's not exactly great with anger management, but it was a very funny part of the show. And then other elements too of just the stories. And, you know, we talk about Jarrett, like they were trying to do this parallel with Jeff Hardy, where it was like, he knew he's been in that place. I didn't find that as effective as they were going for, because how do I say this? I don't know if it's like, if he's been in trouble multiple times after that, you know what I mean? And he left AEW similarly because of an issue like that. So I don't know if it landed as much for me with that parallel with Jeff Jarrett. I don't know if that's me being harsh or whatnot, but
No, so it's not, because on the show, they made it seem, and Jeff Hardy made it seem like that was his like literal turning point
Yeah.
to turning his entire life around.
Yeah.
That was not the case.
No.
So, but I do think they do, like, if you don't know any better, you do see the parallels between Jeff Hardy, where he was in 2011, and Jeff Jarrett when, much later on
Yep.
in his career, literally the same, being, too drunk or too medicated or whatever to go out to the ring. And you see that behind the scenes stuff. And you're like, oh my God, like it's, and everyone was so mad at Jeff Hardy. And so you can see the parallels. But I think to your point, and why I'm really looking forward to the rest of this season is they understand the arc of storytelling, dark side of the ring.
Yeah.
And they're not out to sugarcoat it. They're not out to make people look terrible, but they're not out to sugarcoat it either. They can't do everything. They basically told you we tried to get a hold of Dixie Carter, and Dixie Carter didn't want to do it. You can't make Dixie Carter do it.
Nope.
I would have liked to have heard from Kurt Angle. Those are my two biggest disappointments in telling this story. But I did think they had enough to tell the story when you look at it from you mentioned at the beginning. They were going to tell the story of TNA, but they were going to do it through the Jeff Jarrett lens.
Yeah.
And you were going to get the Jeff Jarrett kind of life storyline arc through TNA, even though he had worked for WWE and been now in AEW and been all over the place. WCW, like he's been everywhere. But you were going to get the TNA story through the lens and then the story arc of Jeff Jarrett's life. And I think you can say that they did a good job at showing you the peaks and the valleys of Jeff Jarrett's life.
I agree with that. I guess just kind of giving a final review here of the 3 episodes. There were elements of this when I was watching that gave me the same feeling of Who Killed WCW, their miniseries.
Yep.
Where I was frustrated with some of the answers and the way that they portrayed some stuff, specifically about the pay-per-views. And I think they overstated how important TNA was to the wrestling industry. I got why they were doing it, but I think they overstated a little bit too much, where I'm like, I know what you're trying to establish. Like, oh, they needed to be an alternative when the dust was settled, but they didn't really change wrestling that much, in my personal opinion. Yep. So there were things that they overstated on this show that I didn't really like. One of the things I would have liked on this, I would have liked a Dave Meltzer or a John Pollock or some sort of wrestling journalists on there to kind of give you a reporter look at some of the stuff going on with TNA so that you could better identify, because I think you and I can understand where some of the workers are working.
Agreed. But we're not on the show.
Yeah, well, that's right. We would have been great if Versage or I are getting set for the documentary and getting the big camera in front of us.
This is Wrestling Host.
That's right. I get the little graphic on there. But we'll await that call. But I would have liked a wrestling journalist. There were other couple of names I would have liked to have seen with, like, I thought Scott Tamora was really good because he's also kind of in a state where it's like, I'm moving on from TNA. I've got my own thing going. So I'm going to be a little bit more upfront about stuff. Jeff, for all of his faults with some of the things of his look for TNA, in terms of how he came across, I thought he came across very well. There were guys on there that I was like, okay, Scott Steiner didn't contribute much, but I didn't think he came off badly or anything like that.
No, not at all. He just didn't give a lot. But when he got emotional, you're like, wow, okay.
Yeah, took you aback. D'Lo was great. I thought D'Lo was great. But yeah, David Sahadi I thought was also really good. I really like Sahadi. But overall, like, I enjoyed this. I do like the elements they showed here. And again, when they started looking at the human side of things, that's when I really latched on. But when they were looking at the history of the company itself, and again, some of that is because of the 3 parts, and that's going to be tough. They had said before that they were wanting to have more parts to this and really make this a big thing, but they just weren't able to get that approval. So I totally understand that. But there were still things when it came to some of the things they talked about with TNA and its history that I felt that they either overstated or they didn't explain enough on, especially the Kurt Angle stuff. Like they made it seem like he was just available. And I'm like,
Mhm.
there's more to the Kurt Angle stuff. There's a lot of things you could touch on with TNA. But overall, I enjoyed it. There were definitely some characters that kind of frustrated me. Shockingly, I didn't think Vince Russo came off bad on this. I was stunned. Like I thought he played his part. You could tell why they like going to him because he's a soundbite machine.
You
For
know
them.
exactly what you're going to get because he's not changing.
Yep, exactly. He is who you think he is.
Same with Cornette.
Yep.
They're exactly the same every time. And it's like if you want that element in your show, then you just go to them.
Yep. That's another guy, Dutch Mantel. I think he was sick during that time, so they couldn't get him. But would have been nice to get Dutch's perspective because he's always been pretty neutral on that sort of stuff. Like I know he's friends with Cornette, but
I'm really with you though. Like Tanay, I would have loved to have heard from.
Yeah.
A journalist, whether that's Meltzer or somebody else, and then Dixie Carter and Kurt Angle.
Yeah.
But you're never going to get everybody. And they did have a decent amount of people, right? They both Hardys. More on, from Karen and Jeff than you probably thought at some points you were going to get. They seem fairly open about it. So, yeah, I mean, like, I think it's a good start here to Dark Side of the Ring, 3 parts. Up next, Zach.
Oh, yeah. Let's go.
Samoa Joe and Necro the Butcher.
Necro Butcher.
Just
Necro Butcher. Not Necro the Butcher, just Necro Butcher, baby.
Should be Necro the Butcher. But anyway, infamous time that they had. I'm very much looking forward to this.
Yeah. Have you seen the match itself, or are you going to wait for the Dark Side?
I saw it a long time ago, but I'm going to wait to rewatch it like right before.
There you go. Yes.
I think that's the play.
Yeah. That match rocks. It rocks. I'm interested to see how they explain it. I saw a preview clip that they put out where they're talking about the message boards and the rivalry between Ring of Honor and CZW. And I was like, oh, here we go. This is the stuff that hasn't been talked about that needs to be talked about more. So I'm fascinated to see how they cover this match. And I think it's going to be well worth it in the end.
I don't want to promise. I was going to say the word promise. I do hope that folks for the rest of the episodes will be within the sort of hour mark.
Yes.
But
I have a feeling with some of the topics it will be. I think in this case, it's just because it's TNA and there's so much
to talk about. There was 3 parts.
Exactly.
I was actually trying at the first half of the first hour, maybe the first 40 minutes to go like, okay, I think I can rein Zach in. I think I can get him. But then I'm like, no, it's okay to go longer because 3 parts. We're literally doing 3 shows in one.
Yep.
And if you think about it, we're under time at that point.
Yep. When you do the math, and I'm not very good at math, but if you do the math, the math checks out.
Okay.
Like Scott Steiner's math.
So many good things that come from the world of professional wrestling. So, yes, we will be here each and every week with our Dark Side of the Ring review. And coming up next week will be Necro Butcher and Samoa Joe. You can watch it on Crave TV. You can watch it on YouTube. You can watch it on a lot of different places. It's not that hard to find. For me, I just typed it into YouTube, and Zach, wouldn't you know? There it is.
There it is.
Didn't have to work harder than that.
Yep.
So it's not one of these, I need the streaming service. Like you can go and find it fairly easily. And if you're a wrestling fan, you probably enjoy some of the behind the scenes stuff. And this is one of the, what I will say is WWE Unreal's also coming up.
Don't remind me, Lee. I know it's coming up.
It is coming up, and I wouldn't say that WWE Unreal is like Dark Side of the Ring. One tells a lot more of the truth than the other?
Yeah. Oh,
And the answer
I,
is Dark Side of the Ring. Just
yep.
saying.
Yep. I'm still trying to mentally prepare for that. I don't think I'll ever be fully ready, but
But you will be, because I believe Necro Butcher and Samoa Joe comes out on the same day.
oh, there you go. I think you might be correct. Yeah. So
Okay.
I got some things to watch that day.
Right. So
I know what I'm watching first.
you can well, yes, you should, because I want you to watch the WWE Unreal second. So I need you in a bad mood for that.
Okay,
So I
perfect.
don't need you coming back more to the middle after watching Dark Side of the Ring. Okay.
Okay.
But yes, for Dark Side of the Ring, we'll be here each and every week with individual reviews of shows and some really good topics coming up. Paul Orndorff is on the list. I don't have the list in front of me. Missy Hyatt's on the list.
Yep.
Necro Butcher, Samoa Joe's coming up next week.
The Renegade.
Oh, the Renegade. I am looking forward to how they tell the story of the Renegade.
Yeah. I am interested to see how they are able to get that story across. Again, it's a tragic story. It is Dark Side of the Ring, but it is
but some of the most memorable episodes, quite honestly, for me, have been about people that weren't like complete megastars.
Yep.
But when you dig into their story, you're like, wow, that's a crazy story. And that's why they're on Dark Side of the Ring. So sometimes the lesser names are the better shows. So we'll see how they do it. But looking forward to reviewing each and every one of them. Zach, that is the 3-part Dark Side of the Ring report here on This Is Wrestling of Jeff Jarrett and The Battle for TNA. So for Zach McGibbon, I'm Lee Versage. Thank you for listening to Dark Side of the Ring episodes 1, 2, and 3 here on This Is Wrestling.